Hello and welcome to this special author interview for FanFiAddict. Hello to everybody who's joining us live. Special welcome to you. I'm Frasier Armitage, part-time robot, full-time nerd, author of New Yesterday and Time's Ellipse. And joining me today is somebody who I'm so excited to speak to because I'm a massive fan of this person and their stories. They're the author of This Is Our Undoing, The Way the Light Bends, Mother Sea, and most recently, The Last to Drown. The way that they write is so elegant and lovely, and I don't know how they do it, so I can't wait to pick their brains and find out. It is the winsome wordsmith, Lorraine Wilson. Raine, how are you doing today?
I'm fine, thank you. God, that's a hell of an introduction. I feel all emotional already, so thank you for that.
No, I am such a fan of your stories. They're just so lovely to read, and as a fan of speculative fiction as well, they're so different because they cross so many different genres and everything. So I can't wait to dive into it with you. It's absolutely great. Tell us a little bit about your most recent book, The Last to Drown. What can people expect from it?
Oh, see, now, before I came this morning, I was like, I really need to have a pitch for this book because he's bound to ask me what it is. And then I forgot. So, off the top of my head, The Last to Drown is about the bargains we are willing to make when we think we've got nothing left to lose. And it follows a woman called Tina who has lost her husband in a car crash that has left her with debilitating injuries and missing the last several months of her memories. And she is desperate to get those memories of her husband back. And she goes to stay with her estranged aunt at their family home in Iceland in search of healing, and discovers that her aunt is living in fear of the sea. And then shenanigans ensue. And it's full of kind of Icelandic ghosts and Icelandic scenery and family secrets and all those kinds of good things.
You see that off the top of your head? See, that is, what did I tell you? It's absolutely, everything you say is elegantly done, Raine. It's amazing. I think for me, I was trying to think, like, how do you even begin to pitch this book? Because there are so many layers to it. Was it hard sort of coming up with a pitch for it after you'd written it?
Well, yeah, I don't really have one. I kind of, it was one of those things that I wrote and then just threw at my agent and said, here, have a thing. It's kind of a thing. Is it any good? So I don't think I've really cracked the whole high concept pitching your book skill yet, which I probably should work on. But yeah.
Oh no, I think however brilliantly, minded you are when it comes to pitching, if you've got that as a skill and a talent and everything, if there's any listeners out there that have that, I still think that anybody would struggle to sort of figure out exactly how to condense this, because it's strange. It's a novella. It's not a full-length novel, but it's so packed with so many intricate sort of things that all collide together in ways, and it doesn't just do this, it goes an extra layer and then an extra and then an extra one again. What was it like sort of keeping all of that in your head as you were writing it? Did you ever feel like you were getting lost in the story yourself sometimes?
Well, it actually started out as a 2,500 word short story, and was trying to do all of this stuff, was trying to do all of these layers of things and metaphors and meanings and stuff, and failing in grand style. And I kind of went, oh yeah, that's not working, and abandoned it. And then Francesca, who's the editor at Luna Press, told me I needed to write a novella. And I was like, oh, I wonder if this story that completely failed in 2,500 words would actually work if I gave it a little bit more room. So it was more about, rather than kind of trying to wrestle things down into that space, it was more about giving that story a chance to breathe and just grow and be itself, rather than me trying to force it into this sort of short form. So I don't know. It sounds really facile, but my brain is a very messy place, and it tends to just work on multiple layers anyway. And it's hard. The hard thing for me is bringing it all together rather than, you know, having it sort of putting it all in there in the first place. It's all there anyway because it is. And then I have to sort of make sure that I've actually explained enough of it and tied it up at the end. And that's always the tricky bit. So it does take a bit of making sure I haven't been too vague. I tend to err on the side of just hinting at stuff and then forgetting to actually explain them. And I have a lot of beta comments going, "This was beautiful, but what did it mean?" So a lot of my editing is going, okay, I actually now need to explain this, which means tying up the threads, which sort of help crisis. But I get there in the end, hopefully, kind of.
Yeah, it's great, and it's great to hear that you go through that process of taming the chaos. That's a really, really helpful thing, because I think for a lot of writers, they feel like, you know, editing is about sort of, you know, sort of taking everything that you've got and then doing these massive restructures and doing these rewrites and, you know, polishing. Whereas in actual fact, sometimes it's about its own like process of discovery, isn't it? Is editing.
It is, yeah. And I think the more, I mean, I plan a lot and I do a lot of planning, but I don't plan to the level where things don't surprise me, if you know what I mean. So I will write and I drop in sort of sets of imagery and motifs that I don't plan in advance. And then I have to kind of, when I'm editing, go, okay, I need to make sure this thread is actually threaded all the way through rather than just when I remembered to throw it in there because it sounded nice. So yeah, editing is very much to me about, I created something with a heart in the first draft. And in editing, I have to go back and make sure I really know what that heart is and what it's trying to do, and bring that through the whole thing. So it's not just something that sort of is rumbling away in the background, but is something that's fully woven through the entire narrative. So yeah, considering how much of a planner I am, my editing is still very much part of the discovery of the story.
Oh, that's really lovely. And one of the things that threads all the way through The Last to Drown, which people may be expecting from the fact that there is drown in the title, is the sea. One of your previous books is Mother Sea, which again has an awful lot of sea sideness.
Yeah.
That's on an island. What's with the sea, Raine?
Partly I live next to it, so it's kind of there in my subconscious all the time. You know, every time I open the window, I can hear it. So I think it's slightly inescapable anyway in my subconscious, but also partly I mean, it's such a presence in any folklore that for any society that grew near the sea on an island in coastal societies, you know, it's such a pervasive force, and it's something, you know, we all have done the going to the seaside and just staring at the sea and just being entranced by the waves. And that's such a weird thing to be entranced by, like it's just water kind of moving, but there's something so elementally powerful about the sea and so multifaceted as well. And there's so many moods, and the way we talk about the sea is so emotive. You know, it has moods and it has character, and I think that just provides such a rich resource to draw on as a writer. There's so much you can play with the, you know, the layers of the psychology of your characters and what they see in the sea and how that's reflecting their own narrative, and how the sea can be its own character within the story as well. And that adds a whole other dimension to the way that your plot can unfold and the imagery that you can play with. So it's just, I mean, I think the natural world in general is just such an amazingly powerful toolkit to play with as a writer. And then, yeah, the sea, it's just a cool thing. And it's kind of, and it can be, I love the dichotomy of it as well. It's such a it's a resource, you know, that coastal communities depend on entirely, and yet it's also the greatest danger that they face. And that I love that contrast of the, you know, the need and the fear is such a powerful thing to draw from as well, I think.
And there's a mystery about it as well, isn't there? It's like, you know,
Yeah,
we haven't really explored it to its fullest depths, and yet when you see it every day, you see how it changes and shifts, and you think, well, how and why? And it kind of,
yeah,
you see yourself in it, and it's a lovely, lovely thing to draw on, like you say, as a writer. But you've done it in very different ways. In with Mother Sea, making it this almost like a character in itself, and the, you know, what it's
mm,
trying to tell the people, and then with The Last to Drown, it being this almost kind of extension of something that the character is going through. Was it nice to sort of take it from different angles with these different stories?
yeah. It really was, and I think, I mean, it wasn't something that I sort of intentionally did. I didn't sit down and go, right, I'm going to write a different sea story this time. It's just that that's the way it grew from the story seed that I started with. But it was fun coming from Mother Sea, where the ocean in that story is such a is a maternal force almost. It's the deity, and it's very much a kind of guiding light, as well as a source of threat, as well as the benevolence. Um, and that's it's to go to Iceland and then take a very different set of, I don't know, themes or vibes from the sea and play with that in a completely different way was really fun. But it kind of it fitted with, you know, with the Icelandic kind of color palette as well. You know, of the black sand and the white glaciers and the dark sea, and it was just felt very vibey and fun to play with that contrasting setup of imagery. Yeah.
Oh yeah, definitely, because it's completely different culturally from Mother Sea. It's a complete
Yeah.
contrast, which again,
Yeah.
yeah, but it's for anybody who's read Mother Sea, and I know that a lot of people have enjoyed that book. Um, it's you will enjoy The Last to Drown in a different way, I think, which is really nice. There are lots of threads, I think, that link all of your stories. One of them being this motif of characters that lose something, and in that loss, they then find something. And this aspect of grief that sort of is present in all of your stories. Does it take stamina as a writer to be writing these stories that are so emotive and that cut so to the heart of, you know, what we all experience as humans?
Um, Thank you. That's a lovely thing to say. Yes, it does. I think the thing is, you have to write the things that matter to you, and you have to care. I think, for me, you have to care very deeply about the things you're writing about. Otherwise, the story will fall flat. It won't have the same um, resonance with readers if it didn't have that resonance with you in the first place. So I want to write the hard stuff and the stuff that kind of takes a little bit out of me to write. But yeah, it's definitely something that each book brings its own challenge. And each time you think you've cracked it, the sort of method of how to balance your emotions and your story's requirements, and each book kind of tells you that you haven't quite cracked it yet, and you need to do a bit more learning. But I think that that's healthy, and I think it's very important as a writer to learn your own boundaries and know when to step away from a story, and also know when to write it just for yourself and not for public consumption. But I really want to get certain narratives out there in the world, and so I think it's worth taking paying a certain cost to write things for the sake of having those stories out there and having those conversations with readers. So it's a constant kind of decision making process. It's constant navigating of that landscape, I think. But yeah, it's not always easy, but it's always important to me, and it matters enough for me to do that.
Yeah, and I think that you definitely see the payoff for the cost that you put into it, because I know that these stories will mean a lot to a lot of people, because there is you don't mind the despair of grief so much as explore the hopefulness that goes along with that as well. And having stories like that means so much to people who grieve, and because we need that light as well as the darkness to be able to relate to it. Is that something that consciously you're trying to put into your stories when you sit down and you imagine a new one, or is that just something that just comes naturally, that just pours, onto the page?
I think it's a little bit of both. I think I'm not very good at writing happy endings or happy, sort of happy. And my mum tells me that I need to write happy stories, and I keep trying and failing. And she keeps on going, no, this one still made me cry. And I'm like, yeah, sorry, Mum. So I'm not drawn to the happy story. And I don't like neatly tied up narratives either. I don't like everything being sort of perfectly resolved and everyone waltzing off into the sunset happily, because that's not how life works, for a start. And also that's not how folkloric stories tend to work. And my stories are often so tied up with folklore that I prefer the influence of that sort of story pattern and that kind of way of ending stories. But I do like to tell myself that I tend to end stories hopefully. Like, they might not be happy, but they're hopeful. And I think that's something that really feels like a powerful thing to say that, yes, these dark emotions happen, or these dark experiences happen, but this too shall pass, that there will be a dawn and there will be another day. And sometimes all you need to do is get to that next day, and that's enough. And that can be a good thing and a victory in and of itself. And I think that can be, it's not the big shiny sort of Hollywood message, but I think it can be more achievable and more powerful for that.
Yeah, definitely. And it works on multiple layers too, because, we all need hopefulness personally, but then to a wider world, we all want to be hopeful about and find reasons, like real reasons for hopefulness, and I imagine that as your background in ecology, that you've probably got more reason than most to sort of look at the wider world and say, well, yeah, these are reasons that we can be hopeful. These are reasons which is, maybe the challenges to that. Do you find that your background in ecology is something that has helped you to be able to craft these kinds of narratives?
It's definitely shaped my approach to writing and shaped what I draw from in my stories. I would say there's an infinite well of rage as a conservation scientist. There's just so much rage. Yeah, but I think, like you say, I think it's important to acknowledge that and go, we are facing huge threats and huge existential crises, and despair isn't an option. And we need narratives that carry us, that express our anger and give catharsis to our anger, but also give us hope and give us a feeling of empowerment. And I think a lot of what I try to find when I tackle these kinds of subjects is that sense of empowerment, because I think structurally society likes to disempower us over so much. And I want to, if there's anything that I can like teach my daughter or teach myself when I'm angry or when I'm despairing, is that I do have my own agency still. And so though that's the kind of message, and I don't like thinking about messages because I don't think that fiction should be a soapbox, but if there's something I want to carry from my anger into my fiction, it's the sense of empowerment to act on that anger and to be empowered by it rather than disempowered.
Yeah, that's brilliant. And I think you strike such a great balance with it too, because you I've never read a book of yours and felt it comes over as preachy, but I have read books of yours and it has got me thinking about some of these issues, and that's a powerful skill to have as a storyteller. Is that something that, when it comes to the craft and when it comes to your, how much you've had to work on your style and all these kinds of things? Because let's just talk about style for a second, Raine. The way that you write is lyrical and poetic and beautiful, and it's like reading art is what it is. I love it so much. Is that something that comes naturally, or have you had to really work to get that skill?
That's just how it comes. I mean, that sounds really kind of nauseatingly simplistic, but that is just how it happens. And actually the tricky thing is rationing my metaphors and my imagery and my, actually I need to have a plot, not just lots of pretty words in a row. So it's, yeah, I have a very, for somebody who has absolutely zero artistic skill, I have a very image driven brain, and sensory brain as well. The sort of sounds and smells and all the rest of it, and the tactileness of my environment matters to me a lot. And I think that all feeds very much into my writing. I think one of the reasons it comes across as very poetic or whatever is because it's so full of sensoriness and that sort of level to it. And that's just my brain. That's just, that thing with the apples and whether people see, a drawing of an apple or a 3-dimensional apple or whatever. I'm way off that scale somewhere, and that's just something my brain does. I don't know.
Well, long may it continue. Yeah, and well done, Raine's brain. That's I think one of the things that I love about reading your books is this sort of sense of how character is tied to the language as well, and it's not just lots of pretty words in a row for the sake of it. It's all so centered on the character, and usually these are characters that are unraveling in certain ways. Like with This Is Our Undoing and The Last to Drown, these characters are going through these huge things, and they're kind of coming apart. What tips have you got for anybody who, is trying to approach the characters in that kind of way, where you're writing a character that's so rooted to the book, but also is kind of also unraveling?
Oh God. I put quite a lot of work into planning the psychological arc of my characters before I start writing. And most of my planning is in the internal arc of each of my characters. So I do put quite a lot of time into developing their background and their flaws, and how their flaws are shaping their behavior, and the lens that they carry into the world, and how that shapes their responses to their environment and to other people. And I do a lot of traumatizing my characters, and following through, with how our broken edges shape us, and how we adapt to those broken edges in ways that perhaps aren't helpful, but that are about survivorship in that moment. And I've always been really, really fascinated by the way that trauma, not so much in the moment, but years later, even generations later, shapes behavior, and shapes the way in which we view and react to stuff. So I probably spend too much time thinking about that for my characters. So when it comes to writing them, I find it really fun to play on a prose line level with telling the readers stuff about my characters from the way I describe the setting, and providing that level of kind of hinting at the subtext by using my setting to do that for me. And I find that what I enjoy about that, which makes me sound like a little bit of a cackly witch, is thinking that I can maybe trick my readers into feeling things and picking up on things without noticing how I've done that to them. So the way that I'll describe, a bird song, or, something, the flowers will seed emotion into the scene and into my characters without the reader perhaps realizing that I've done that to them. And I don't know if that works, but I find that incredibly satisfying. That fills me with glee that I might be able to trick my readers like that. And yeah, so I think the combination of putting a lot of effort into the psychological development of my characters before I start writing, and then taking way too much pleasure in trying to manipulate my readers when I'm scene setting and when I'm describing stuff, is probably how I get to those lovely things you were saying.
Oh, that's great. When you said that you were going to sound like a cackly witch, I thought you were suddenly going to break out and say double, double, toil and trouble. But it's like, but that was much better. That was great. I think the thing with character as well is that all of your like you say, like everything about the book has character, and that's true of all of your stories. Do you enjoy that process of looking at something and then figuring out what kind of character it has? Are you doing that sort of all of the time, or is that something that you're sort of approaching with each new book, thinking, right, okay, what can I use to really hone in on this person? What best is the best way of sort of spotlighting them? Or is it just that you're everywhere like, okay, that spoon is this, that knife is that? That's it. How does it work for you?
I don't really know. Stuff like this is very organic for me. And so to kind of go back and analyze how it happened is a bit tricky. I think one of the greatest things I ever learned from somebody, a friend actually called Eva Dundas, and she did a workshop on defamiliarizing yourself when you're writing in fiction. And it was just about how to take settings or objects or places or times or whatever that are very, very familiar to you, and making them unfamiliar and seeing them with entirely fresh eyes from an entirely different lens and perspective, and how doing that frees you up from preconceptions and allows you to use those things in different ways. So like you say, the spoon can be, it can be something totally different if you forget everything that you assume about a spoon, and I think there is a degree of playing with the world and finding ways to explore it in different ways. So when you first start writing a story, you might be quite linear, and you discover the bits of the world you need for your story and not really much more. Some writers don't do that. Some writers world build amazingly before they start writing. But I think that there's always room for, when you're writing a scene, just kind of pausing and going, okay, but what if I was a mouse in this scene? What would I be noticing? What if I was a fly on the wall? What if I was not this character that I'm writing from, but the other character in the scene? What would I be noticing? And just disconnecting yourself slightly from the automatic and making sure that you are approaching it in ways that maybe your reader won't expect. Because if you can say something in a way that isn't what your reader is expecting to follow, you can spark different connections in their brain, and you can make them go, oh, and just that little bit of, oh, that's nice, or I'm feeling something I didn't expect to feel here, or, and I think that that's a really nice thing. There's definitely times when prose needs to be invisible, but there's also times when I think being unexpected in your prose can really add depth to the reader experience. And I think a lot of it's about finding that line, and when it needs to be invisible and when it needs to be unexpected and new and unfamiliar.
Yeah. So having the reader not just look at the spoon, but think like the spoon. That's a really, I really like that
There's a
defamiliarization.
story C. Can you write a story from the point of view of a spoon?
Yeah. Yeah. Can you imagine how a spoon would view a mouth? That would be awful. That would be
Oh my God, that's like body horror. That's just, oh
yeah.
no.
Yeah. No, it's yeah, that's got me at all sorts. I've completely forgotten the next question I was going to ask you now because I'm now thinking. Let's go back to folklore because you mentioned you have this love of folklore. What is it about folklore that inspires you, or is there like a particular tale that like really got like sucked in your passion for folklore that made you want to look at it further?
Oh God, I don't know. I mean, I grew up on folklore and ghost stories, and I loved all the sort of world mythology books I could get my hands on, and Grimm's fairy tales and all the rest of it. And I, so I just they sort of shaped my brain as a kid anyway, I think. And then as I've grown and seen, sort of traveled and all the rest of it, I think you get such a powerful sense of how much folklore tells you about the people that created that folklore and how their relationship with their environment formed and how they view themselves and others. And it's such an interesting lens to hold up against people, that I think it can be very telling and very powerful as a way to explore characters, and a way to both connect them with their settings and disconnect them from their settings. So you can create a great sense of alienation with a character by having them unfamiliar with the folklore surrounding them, or create a sense of deep rootedness by having them embedded in their folklore, and it becomes a really powerful tool in that way. But it's just such a fascinating thing, and I love the darkness in folklore, and I love the history, the sort of parallels between why folklore arose, and why these commonalities of folklore arose all around the world, and how those symbols carry so many layers and so much depth. And things like foxes or wolves or rabbits or whatever, and they carry such different stories in different folklores around the world, and that's fascinating. Like they become such different things, and they have so many different significances and layers and emotions attached to them, depending on where you come from and which stories you grew up with. And I love that. I think that's fascinating, and I love the way that folklore doesn't shy away from the darkness at all, especially things like Scottish folklore, and you've got Nuckalevy and stuff. It's just like yeah, horror stories. And I probably read Grimm's fairy tales too young, and that probably explains a lot. But I don't know. I think they're an amazing resource just as a reader, because they're just so dark and light and intertwined and unexpected and beautiful. But as a writer, they're such a powerful tool to draw from as well. I can't imagine writing a story without them. I'm not sure if that's possible.
Yeah, that's lovely, and it's lovely that they're such a part of you, and so they feed into your stories, and it's not it. And like you said about it being organic, it's so lovely that you think in folk tales. That's fantastic. I love how some people today would say, "Oh yeah, Roald Dahl's a little bit dark," but have you read Grimm's fairy tales?
Exactly.
It makes Roald Dahl look like a Disney movie. The
Yeah.
in terms of you talking about as well places and having their own stories. I know that when you were working as a conservation scientist, you got to travel to different places. Did you get to learn some of the stories of these different places while you were there?
I did, luckily. Yeah. I mean, I think I would love to go back and learn more and spend more time just listening to people. I spent far too much time on my own in forests watching animals instead, rather than talking to people. But no, I was very lucky to get to live and work alongside locals in lots of parts of the world and experience their traditions and their folklores, and yeah, that's a huge honor to be able to experience that kind of stuff, and I treasure those memories deeply.
That's lovely. And does it help to inform when you're creating the place? Does having that knowledge of those kinds of stories and people, does that help you to craft that other world? You know, like Iceland, or like the island in Mother Sea, or the forest in This Is Our Undoing.
Yeah, definitely. And I think, I mean, it's difficult coming to these things as an outsider, because you can't be as embedded in the folklore as, and somebody who has grown up in that world. So a lot of my stories tend to be written like, The Last to Drown is written from the perspective of an outsider, for that reason primarily. But I think, for me, one of the first things I do when I decide to write from a particular setting is draw up lists of the animals and plants and the kind of climate and stuff in that area, and look at lots of photographs from whenever I was there. But the second thing I do is read books on the folklore and listen to people talking about the folklore, blog posts and YouTube videos and stuff, and just absorb as much of that as I can, because that's the other side of the coin to the natural world for me. You've got the environment, and you've got the folklore that environment spawned, and those two are entirely intertwined.
That's really fascinating, and it's such a good tip that I haven't heard before about, if you're going to write in a different place, learn the folklore of that place. That's really, really good. In terms of other aspects of travel, do you think that it's helpful as well to sort of step outside of your own, what the norms are, to be able to help you with, we talked about defamiliarizing yourself with certain things. Does travel and other cultures and experiencing that help with that process, do you think?
Yeah, definitely. I think, and I mean, I don't think it's necessary. It's definitely a luxury and a privilege to be able to do that. So I'm just watching my cat trying to figure out whether he can open the door. Are you stuck, Ginny? Oh, the trauma. Oh dear. He'll survive. Now I've forgotten what I was saying. It's travel, yes. It's a privilege to be able to travel, and it's not necessary for writing from different perspectives, but I think it definitely makes you more comfortable with being the outsider, and also with reframing what is the norm and what are the defaults. And if you stay in one culture, one society your whole life, you are so familiar with the defaults of that society that it can be very, very hard to imagine a community functioning on different defaults. And I think if you've lived in a place where you are very much the outsider, and where all of your defaults don't fit, you do become more comfortable just with the whole process of reframing the lens with which you view the world around you. And I think that that's really helpful coming to fiction. It's something that I definitely consciously do during my planning stage, is construct the lens with which I'm going to view this society or this world within my story, and think very consciously about what are the norms and what are the hidden things, and what are the dynamics and the shapes of power within that society. And I think that travel has definitely given me more understanding of how that can work. It's a constant learning process, and that's not something that will ever end. But yeah, I'm very lucky to have been able to have the experiences I have, and I hope that I do that justice when I bring those inspirations to my work.
Oh, you absolutely do. And I think the tip for me that I'm getting here is that when I next travel up to Scotland for Worldcon or for a writing convention, I need to read more Scottish folklore before I come. That's the key to it, I think. Yeah.
You definitely need to read more folklore, and then go swimming in a loch, and just that moment where you're swimming in Loch Ness and you realize you can't see your feet because the water's so peaty, and you don't believe the stories, but also suddenly do, and that's just, yeah, it's
You
good. You got to
become the
experience.
monster. That's the. No, I like it. I think I remember traveling up to Scotland for my holidays when I was young, but we never read the Scottish folk tales. It was always
Oh,
about the place,
really?
and so I feel like I've missed out on a lot of Scotland for that reason, especially after this
It's
chat. Yeah.
Yeah, no, it's an amazing place for folklore, and there's the sort of classic stories that have been picked up on and made famous, like the Kelpies and the Selkies, and all that kind of, and the Nessie. But there are so many others, that are just brilliant and dark and weird, like the Blue Men of the Minch. I love the Blue Men of the Minch. They're just so weird, and they're just random and brilliant. So yeah, you need more stories, more Scottish folklore.
Shout out to the Blue Men of the Minch. And we want to do a shout out particularly to the Edinburgh SFF writing group as well, because
Yes.
I first met you. We were saying before our interview today, when I travelled up to Chimera, it was my first literary con, and you were so welcoming, and everybody in ESFF was so welcoming, and it was brilliant to become a part of that community. But how does the writing group and having that community of writers who are local to you and who you know and who you've met, how does that help with your writing?
Oh God, I think community is everything when you're writing. I mean, for all that, publishing is a wonderful place, but it's also very complicated and very flawed and full of rejection, and it can be tough, and it's the friends you make along the way, the community that you build is such an amazingly important part of building your own resilience as an author navigating publishing. But also it's a joy to be part of a group of people who all love books and get to talk about books together. And it sounds sort of silly, but that's just such a joyous thing to have, and to have people who are unabashedly joyous and in love with fiction and storytelling and the power of that. And these are people who, when you're having a good day, are going to cheer you on and lift you up, and when you're having a bad day, are going to give you a hug or a kick up the arse if that's what you need. And that's just lovely, and you do that for them, and you get to see them succeed and make progress in their writing in whatever form that takes, and that's joyous as well. And I think, much as I love being published, and I love the privilege and the honor of that, but the friends that I've made are the best thing for me that's come from discovering writing. And I'm so appreciative of my communities.
Yeah, and I would echo that as well, that like the community is everything, with publishing. It's like fuel, isn't it? It's like what keeps us going when we hit the dark times of writing. So yeah, it's lovely to hear that we have that in common, Raine, and that, yeah. And to the ESFF guys who are watching and who are catching up on this later, just, you're all legends. So thank you for
We
being
love
there.
you.
Yeah. Another thing that I know that you love very much is your cats. How did they feel about your books? Do you ever read your books to the cats?
Mostly they feel like the keyboard is theirs and is getting in the way of strokes. They do listen to me talk through plot points sometimes, and they're moderately patient with that, but generally they are fairly intolerant of anything that gets between them and dreamies. So they're kind of, they're not the most supportive people in my life, but they do tolerate me talking to myself, so that, and I can pretend I'm talking to the cats rather than talking to myself, which makes me sound a little bit less mad.
You've got to take the wins where you find them, right?
Exactly.
But I would say, if the cats are listening to this, come on, guys, what are you playing at? Like, just give Raine a little bit more keyboard space. We need these stories from her.
Yeah, no, they're pretty rude. I have most of my desk is taken up with a box for them, and no, they don't know.
Are they really the ones that are responsible for all these pretty words, Raine? Is that what it is? Is that the cats as they're
Keyboard
pawing along the
smash.
keyboard? Yeah.
Paws walking across. Yeah, I will blame any typos on them. All typos are the cats.
Yeah, it's true. The thing I want to just talk to you about finally, I guess, is the. Oh, hang on, we've got a comment from Nick Fuller. Hello, Nick. He says that the cats are so demanding. Yep,
They really
absolutely,
are, Nick. Yes,
absolutely, yeah.
they need a stern talking to.
Yes, yeah. If that's one productive thing that's come out of this conversation, it's that the cats should get a stern talking to. Now, I want to talk to you just finally about your dedication, because your book in The Last to Drown is to all your fellow spoonies. What made you want to dedicate the book especially to the spoonies? And first of all, for anybody who's not familiar, what is a spoonie?
What is a spoonie? It is not somebody writing from the persona of a spoon.
I feel like it should be now.
Like it should be. That's my next book. No, spoonies are so. Spoons was a term that was coined by, and I can't remember her name, but there was a woman living with a long-term disabling illness who wrote an essay using spoons as a concept for expressing the energy limitations that we live with, those of us who have chronic illnesses, disabling illnesses. And basically it's around a concept of you start the day with a certain number of spoons, and every single thing you do uses spoons. And the fewer spoons you have, the higher your pain, your brain fog, your exhaustion, all these other things. They build as you expend spoons. And some things only cost 1 spoon. And some days you'll start with loads of spoons and you can do loads, and other days you'll start with 3 spoons and you can't do anything. And the more spoons you use up, the more spoon debt you have, so you crash and it takes you long to recover, and blah, 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 blah. But basically, it's just a really neat concept of expressing the life of somebody with energy limiting, disabling illness. And so it's become a term that the community just adopted wholesale. And we've all just begun like, we're spoonies, because it's such a neat concept and it's such an easy way to explain this messy, weird, very alien existence. So there you go, quick mini essay on spoons. The character in The Last to Drown is the first time I've written from that part of myself. So it's not, living with chronic pain is not a particularly fun thing. And I quite like escaping that in my fiction and writing characters who don't have that, because it's not a bundle of laughs. And as you know, I love to give my characters a fun time, and they're all very happy all the time. So, it's just not something I've wanted to write before, but I decided I wanted to write it, and it felt very natural in this story. And it very much fitted with what I was trying to say, with all of the other things about grief and secrets and the line between the real and the unreal, and how sort of grief can drive you into that place where reality becomes a bit shadowy and murky. And so I decided to write from that perspective and to put that voice out there. And I felt that it's a very personal thing, but also if it helps people a little bit understand that experience, or if it helps people who are spoonies go, yeah, that's, and I've not seen that on the page before, and that's me, that's my daily life, then that's amazing. That's a brilliant thing to have and to have done. So I'm really glad to have it out there, and I'm really, if it helps facilitate conversations, if it makes people like now asking me questions about it, then I think that's great, because it normalizes those kinds of conversations. And I wanted to dedicate the book to them, just because life can be tough as a spoonie, and it's exhausting, and people don't understand. There is no understanding that experience if you don't have it. But other spoonies do understand, and we're out there and we're cheering each other on. And I'm part of talking about writing communities, I'm part of the Society of Authors subgroup for authors with disabilities and chronic illnesses. And shout out to them because they're amazing. And just having that community of other people who just know what it's like and the extra challenges you face as an author within publishing with disabilities. And it's incredibly uplifting and empowering to have that community. And so I just wanted to be part of that conversation and part of giving my fellow Spoonies a little bit of visibility. So, yeah.
And as a fellow Spoonie, I can say that you absolutely succeed in presenting the character in a way that all Spoonies will relate to. It's not just one experience, it's many experiences that can be gleaned from Tina. And I just want to congratulate you on the bravery and the courage that it must have taken to put that experience down onto the page, because it's no small thing to have done that and to have tackled that in fiction and to brought that onto the page. So yeah, congratulations, Raine, because you absolutely smashed it, and it is very much appreciated.
Thank you. Oh, well, that's the whole reason for publishing it, just to hopefully resonate with people. So thank you, that's fantastic.
What's next for you?
What is next for me? I've got the paperback release for Mother C out in May, and then I've got my next novel coming out in November with Solaris. That's We're All Ghosts in the Forest, which I'm really looking forward to. We've got the cover reveal coming in a month, which I'm super excited about because it's so cool. And that's the first in a 2-book contract, so there'll be another book following that, which I'm working on at the moment, actually. And then I have another book going on sub soon. So just, yeah, spinning plates. The joy of being a published author is that you have about 6 projects on the go at once, and people ask you about one and you can't remember which one you're talking about, and it all gets a bit bewildering. But so yeah, next book is We're All Ghosts in the Forest, which is out in November with Solaris.
Fantastic. And for anybody who has heard this and has thought, oh yeah, The Last to Drown, definitely going to be reading that. If you enjoy that, then Mother C is a perfect extension of this lovely allegory that Raine's written. And congratulations as well, Raine, on being longlisted for the BSFA Award for that, because that was, yeah, I was so delighted to see it there. It was a real treat to see. So yeah,
thank you. I was really pleased. Honored to see that there, because it's such a sort of genre mashup of a book, and it toes the line, treads the line very finely between speculative and not speculative, but the speculative aspect of it is really important to me, the power of folklore. So I was really overjoyed and honored to see that on the list.
Who needs genres, Raine? Who needs them? It's, yeah.
I know. They're not my problem. I don't worry about them. Someone else's issue.
So for anybody who is new to you and has seen this and wants to connect and let you know how much they've enjoyed your books or that kind of thing, how can they reach you on your socials?
I am on I'm on Twitter, haha, for what that's worth, as Raine with an E _clouds. I also have a Substack, Shadows on Water, and a WordPress blog, Shadows on Water, which is a good place to find me and has all of my various contacts on as well.
Fantastic. Thank you so much for joining me, Raine, and thank you to everybody who's tuned in as well and watched, and all the best with everything that's coming next.
Thank you so much. Thank you for having me. It's been a joy.